I'm happy to see you all here. Angela is one of our wonderful, wonderful coaches and programs consultants. She's also an external assessor. Everything NOYA from the start. Youth program quality is Angela's thing. So she's going to facilitate this workshop for us today. And we really hope that y'all are able to take some things in, take some things back, and just enjoy the little ride we have today.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheryl-Amber. Thank you for the kind words too. All right, everybody, hello. Let's go ahead and really get started. So we were calling this game time because some of you might be in continual programming. Some of you might be wrapping up summer, moving on into fall. Some of you might be going, oh man, school year, yes. So here we are. We got, what is our new approach with whatever new situations are coming along. So what we're putting forward right now is a culture of coaching as a way to help help your organization meet this time, meet your programming in a way that can really strengthen your leadership, transform your organization. What are some skills and strategies and really mindsets that might help with that? So yeah, that's the deal, the overarching deal. We can go to the agenda, I think is what we have next. And we have an ambitious agenda. First, so just to find out, I don't know if we're going to get to everything, but hopefully we will. I've built it so that if we don't, you at least have the resources. So we want to make sure we know who's on the Zoom, who's here, and where you're coming from. So we'll do that in a few minutes. I want to give you a little bit more information about the objectives of what we're doing in this workshop. Why coaching as an approach that might be helpful to you now, and well, in general, but then also now. Why in particular might coaching help you in the context of COVID, in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, in the context of meeting your teams with whatever social, emotional needs they're showing up with each day, and as that changes each day. We want to ground that in your strengths, your current strengths as a leader. So there are some things we're going to talk about that you already know. There are some things that might be new. There might be new ways to connect information, connect these perspectives that could give you an approach that might reaffirm what you're already doing, or help you to step up a little bit, like, you know what, yeah, that's okay, all right, this is who I get to be in this moment, and this is how I get to serve right now. Where I want to give you a chance to let yourself off the hook a little bit, and the feeling sometimes that you have to have all the answers and all the solutions. So that's a little bit of humility there, wrapped in and honoring that you're one person and you have an amazing team. And then I want to give you a coaching framework and some strategies to help you continue to grow. This is not a, snap, that's it, we're here, we got what we need. This is absolutely a process, and honoring where you are now in the process and what your next step might be in the process. After I present some things, you get to decide what is your next step from there. So that will wrap into our reflections and resources to give you your next steps. All right, next slide. Okay, I'll go into this one now. And yes, Sheryl-Amber just put, feel free to use the chat box. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, some tech norms. But really, so that I want to make sure we're having conversation. For a large part of this hour, it's going to be in the chat. So please do what you can, blow up the chat, give your ideas. I am certain that you have ideas to share that will benefit someone else. Questions, all of those things, please go ahead, put in the chat. Hopefully we'll have time at the end for some question answer and some discussion. I do want to make sure I get you some important information. So quickly, I know most of you, or I've at least heard of most of you in your work, but just a quick background on why I'm the person who's sitting there talking to you about this. My background is in education. I was a special educator. I've done a lot of non-traditional teaching. The largest part of my work has been in youth development, out of school time programming, non-traditional teaching environments. So the place that I did most, that impacts me the most in my past, is New Orleans Outreach, which is why it's that big logo. To give you a little bit more of that piece, it's where I was first a supervisor, where I first had a leadership role within nonprofits. And it happened after Hurricane Katrina and the levee failures. So coming into a leadership role in the midst of crisis and recovery from crisis, I think has informed a lot that might be helpful to you now in what we're in now too. So I'm pulling from that experience. I'm pulling from that perspective in the work, in what I'm presenting today too. Next slide. So what I do now is absolutely work with NOYA and YPQI in all of those things that Sheryl-Amber said a while ago, and so much a believer in the work that the Youth Alliance is doing and how the resources, YPQI and beyond, that they're providing. I wish this was the organization that was around back then. That would have been an amazing thing too. But I'm glad we're here now. In addition to the Youth Alliance work that I do, I'm doing coaching and consulting. So I'm no longer running an organization. I don't feel the need to run an organization, but I do feel a very strong passion in supporting you as you lead organizations. So yes, that comes through NOYA. It comes through coaching leaders and teams. I do personal coaching as well as professional coaching. Sometimes we go back and forth the same person, but I want to be able to hold that space for whatever you need and however I can support. Also within program design, helping to build onboardings and trainings, and especially program-centered evaluations, program design and evaluation. So those are the things that I'm doing now, the work I'm doing now, that I'm just loving, because I'm tapping into how I hopefully can support you amazing people the best. Next slide. All right, so who are you? This is where you get to say a little bit about yourself. If you could, in the chat, give your name, give your organization or your program or your affiliation, how you are coming to this conversation today. And also, who's a cartoon character or a superhero you feel you embody in your work? Give you a minute to think about it, put it in the chat. And if you're particularly inspired, you might even, you could change your name to that if you want. I'll call you that the rest of the time if that really would, inspire you. Kim Possible. My 7-year-old just had a Kim Possible birthday party, Sheryl-Amber. I was thinking about you the whole time. We did missions all over the stay-at-home situation in the house.
I love it. I love it.
It's great. All right, I see Afi saying hello. Ben is saying where he's coming from and Charles Xavier. I don't know who that is.
X-Men.
Is it? See, it's the comics I don't know as well as some of the other cartoon characters my kids are constantly watching. I mean, the superheroes, I guess. Emily is referencing.
I mean, if there's a superhero who literally does exactly what you do, even if it's kind of niche.
You got it. And Brenna, I can totally see it. Totally see it.
Thank you.
So great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Keep them coming. This is so great. All right, we're going to keep rolling those in the chat. Please introduce yourselves, everybody. If you feel like it would just really just give you strength and energy, you could change your name and see yourself with your name right underneath, right here in the Zoom. That'd be fantastic too. All right, we're going to move ahead to the next slide and keep things going a bit. So I can let you know a little bit more about our objectives. Objectives for this time is I want to help you spend a little time grounding yourself in your strengths, give you some information about coaching, and maybe a perspective shift on your own leadership in a direction that is continuing to grow that coaching perspective, giving you some strategies to make that happen. And then, yes, throughout it, we're going to talk about how this approach is really particularly appropriate for uncertain times like we're in now. And before we're done, because we originally planned this workshop to be several workshops over the course of the spring. I want to make sure that we can see this as a start of a conversation, if you so choose. So I want to give a resource in a way that maybe we can continue the conversation. So this is like a first thing, and then how might we continue to grow, and how might I be able to support you as you grow in your coaching skills as a leader. I also want to just say here that our objectives are different from the objectives in the Qualitie Coaching Workshop, which some of you attended or some of you have attended in the past. Qualitie Coaching Workshop is a lot about supporting your staff in their instruction and in their program delivery, which is absolutely extremely valuable. And it was like a huge light bulb moment for me when I took that workshop. We're going to take that place and maybe move things a little further, a little bit in a different direction, mostly just how you can support no matter what your team is doing through this coaching perspective. So whether it's based in their instruction, whether it's based in some problem solving, whether it's based in logistics, these are some skills that you could use in any of those ways. All right. Technoworms. So yes, the more focused your attention is, the higher the value will be for you. I completely understand though, if you are having life happening right now. And if you can show up on video, great. If you can't, I get that too. Yeah, I have a dog at my feet who's terrified of rain. So hopefully he'll just stay calm at this moment and we'll be good. You're going to mostly stay muted until the end. And then if there's time, we'll have some question and answers. And yeah, please just keep things going in the chat. Really want to make sure that we're staying, if I can adjust what we're saying according to what you need or what you're commenting on, I absolutely want to do that, because we've got a lot of stuff that we can kind of ebb and flow as we need to. And thank you for continuing to introduce yourselves as we go. All right. So why is coaching? Why is this something that's important to grow your coaching skills as a leader? There was a survey done a few years ago. It was a longer survey, human resources perspective. And one of the things that came out of it is employees really want their managers to have training on how to coach their employees, how to be that coach. We'll talk a little bit more about what coaching specifically is in this context in a little while. And right now in particular, staff need you to be a coach. A lot of the elements of coaching we're going to talk about are also elements of trauma-informed leadership or crisis management. So building your coaching skills also helps you to hit on the areas that are going to be important in meeting your staff, whatever they're bringing in. All right, so thank you all who participated in the surveys. I so very much appreciate getting your perspective on where you are, what you value about leadership in yourself and in others. I did a cliche word art out of it. Mostly, I started off doing it for myself, and I was like, I'm not putting this up because I'm not doing that. But then the most important word took center stage when I did the word art, so I put it on here anyway. So these are some of the words you all gave as important to a leader who is high impact. And the three biggest words in all of that, the three words that were mentioned the most in the responses that I got, and I apologize, people who just responded in the last couple of days, your responses aren't necessarily going to be reflected here, but I appreciate you giving the input. Vision, listening, and empathy are things that we're going to be hitting on as we go. And so many other wonderful qualities that get to come out when you have a coaching perspective and you're building a coaching culture. All right, so here we are in our first stage of coach development for this workshop. I want to take some time right now to help you ground yourself in what you're already bringing, the strengths you already have. I'm going to imagine, and if you want to kind of contribute in the chat, I'm going to imagine that you all as leaders right now have a lot of questions about, what are we doing? How am I going to make this happen? How am I going to support my staff virtually? We're not even together. How are we going to build community? Lots of those kinds of questions. So I want to stop and recognize that one of the things that is most important as a leader in general, and certainly most important for a leader who is coming from a coaching perspective, is to ground yourself in what you already know. Ground yourself in the strengths you already have. So I want to take you through an exercise that's going to, if you're able to give some focus to it, fantastic. This is where you might need your pen and paper to take down some notes. And I'm going to be asking you some questions, and I'll tell you how to kind of answer or take your notes as you go. If you want to just quickly do jot a little bit of a triangle down on the paper, you can use, it can be like half a sheet of paper. It doesn't have to take up the whole page. But this diagram is something we're going to be traveling up and down. If you see that in the bottom left corner, there's a start here, and then there's an arrow that goes up to the top, and then another arrow that goes down the right side. It's like a mountain. If we're starting at the bottom of a mountain, at the start here, we're going to travel up, and I'm going to ask you some questions along the way, and then we're going to travel down the other side. The space that's open on either side of that triangle, of that mountain, or where you can record some notes along the way. Doesn't have to be super detailed, just a couple of thoughts here and there. Any questions about that before we get started? Okay, let me go through and see some faces. Hey y'all, checking your faces, checking to see who's here. All right, so get yourself, if you would, in a place where you do get to just stop and think a minute about your own leadership. You can close your eyes to go through some of these first questions. You don't have to. If you want to just kind of look down or just create a little bubble for yourself to be able to focus for the next few questions that come along. Make your world a little bit small and just about you. It's helpful. If you want to just take a deep breath and get yourself to a place where, you know what, I'm going to focus on myself and my strengths as a leader right now. And I'm going to ask you to think of a time when you felt truly successful as a leader. A specific time when you felt truly successful as a leader. Just call it in your mind right now. For whatever reason, you feel really good about how that specific experience went. If a leadership experience isn't coming to mind for you, think of a time when you feel like you contributed just high value to other people's work. Once you have an idea or memory, just stop and kind of drink it in. And I'm going to ask you some questions to help you recall that memory. And we're going to start at that bottom, where and when. So my first question is, when did that leadership experience occur? What time of year was it? What time of day was it? Where were you? Were you inside, outside? What kind of space were you in when you were that strong leader, when you had that strong leader experience? What was the space around you like? It's okay if you're still writing. I'm going to ask the next question just so we can keep building that memory. What did you do that made the difference? Write down some notes under the what part. What did you do? What was the result of you being a strong leader? What did you receive from being a part of that experience? Continuing up the left side of the mountain, how specifically did you contribute? How specifically did you work together with others in that experience? How did you partner with them or collaborate with them when you were such a strong leader? Why was that particular experience important to you? Why was it such a special experience? On to who? Who did you become through that experience? Who would you describe yourself as in that experience? Climbing the mountain almost to the top. Who benefited you from you being that person? Who would they describe you as? If you could hear their words, what words might they use to describe you? What words might they have said to you about the impact you made? All the way to the top of the mountain. Who else? Who else do you want to stop and acknowledge benefited from you being that strong leader? Okay, now that we're at the top of the mountain, I'm going to invite you to just take a moment and take a look at what you've written so far about your strong leader experience, about you as a strong leader. Take it in. Now that we're at the top of this mountain, when we go back down the other side of the mountain, I'm going to ask you to take that experience from the past and bring it into the here and now. I'm going to ask you to take that specific memory of being a strong leader, and I'm going to ask you questions to see how you can bring that person, you as a strong leader, into your here and now. So now we're going to go down the right side of the mountain and I'm going to ask you the who and the who else questions kind of together. So when you show up as that strong leader today, who will benefit? Who will you be? Who will you describe yourself as when you show up as the strong leader? Who will others describe you as today, in the here and now? Why is it important to you to be this person, to benefit these people in this way as the strong leader you are? How will you show up as the strong leader in the here and now? How will you work together with others? How will you partner with them? How will you collaborate with them? How will you be their team member as a strong leader today? What will you do that will make the difference? What will be the result? And then to get real specific, where will you be this strong leader? When will you have the opportunity? Maybe the easy opportunity to be the strong leader, maybe acknowledging the where and the when that might be a bit more challenging to be the strong leader, but you are still the strong leader. Now, before we get all the way back down to the bottom of the mountain, what else is important for you to stop and recognize, write down, own about the here and now and how you can be the strong leader in the here and now? What else is important? Now that we're back down to earth, or back down to sea level, I guess, I want to invite you to take a look at what you wrote up the past side of the mountain and down the present side of the mountain. I just want you to take a look and see what you notice. If there are words that jump out at you, if there are thoughts or ideas or connections that you're making, circle, take notes, highlight. If there's anything in particular that you notice that you want to share in the chat, please go ahead and do that. Anything that you want to claim or exclaim, please do. Thanks, Kim Possible. People can't always see the greatness in themselves. Sometimes I have to be the mirror. Amen. What else are you seeing? What else are you noticing about you as a leader from past strong experiences that you can bring into the now? Collaborative vision. If I'm as successful now as I was then, I'll have staff who I can trust to move without me and who have the confidence to do it. Tenacious. Yeah, man. So keep thinking of those words. Whether you put them in the chat or not, own them, please. Please. Such a funky time we're in. Please own them. Please own your strengths. And as we move on to the next part of what we're doing, thank you all for taking the ride up and down the mountain and capturing your thoughts and feelings along the way. As we move on through this workshop, I just want to stop and say that you've already done the first step in building yourself as a coach, a leader who coaches, and that is grounding yourself in your strengths, being sure to stop and acknowledge you've got so much to offer right now. And even when times are difficult to realize that, stopping to ground yourself can be so huge, so hugely serving of yourself, sure, but of everyone, if that's where you're starting from. So let's keep going. And I'm gonna go back so I'm gonna get out of waffle view so I can see the slides too. There we go. All right, so a little bit of concepts and a little bit of information we're going to go into right now. Won't necessarily go through every single slide really thoroughly, but to give you some context, what I'm talking about when I say coaching, I want to tell you what coaching is and what coaching is not, because that's often a huge question. What specifically are we talking about when we say coach, right? So when I say coaching, what I'm not saying is I'm talking about not being that traditional manager or supervisor. Not coming from that traditional place as a manager or supervisor where you kind of, have that command and control approach or that tell and sell. And I'm also not saying that that's never the most important thing to do. There are absolutely times when it's important to have that command and control. It's absolutely important to say that tell and sell. I know from myself and in my own experience, I have had to stop and identify, where's my line? Where can I coach? Where can I leave room for coaching? And where do I just need to be sure that I'm showing up as that manager who's telling, who's doing the command and control? Often, most of the time when I draw that line, it's around safety, right? Like we don't necessarily have to have huge conversations around safety. We just got to get it done. We have to keep things safe. The coaching approach is about collecting your team's strengths, building collaboration. The coaching approach is about a leader supporting and serving, asking and listening, and even better than asking and listening, particularly in this time, but always asking, listening, and empathizing. One thing I really like about the coaching model as it applies to YPQI is the number of times we've been in groups, we've been in COPs where the question has been, how do I get my staff to buy in? How do I get everybody to buy into YPQI? Or it's the next youth development practice we want to make sure we're growing in. And coaching can be a really, really powerful way to help that happen without feeling like you have to tell them and then sell them on it to make sure they're buying in. It can really be a more collaborative approach where they get to own it too. All right, Sheryl-Amber, next, Kim Possible. All right, some objections to coaching that I've heard over and over again. It's just too soft. It's not direct communication. Like I said, there's certain things that don't need conversation. I know, so when I was at Outreach and I was developing my own ideas and understanding of what it meant to supervise or to support a team, I started off in the tell and sell. Absolutely. I was learning how to supervise. I didn't really know what any other approach would be. I had a tremendous gift of a boss who got me coaching, who actually had somebody that she knew, a colleague and a friend who was a coach, who worked with me. And I not only learned where my own coaching and my own leadership was, but I also learned the value of coaching because I was being coached. And so from there, I realized, wait a minute, that's what I want to bring into my leadership. That's what I want to bring into my supervision. And oh my goodness, once I started to be a leader who coaches, it was like well, that's when the magic started happening at Outreach. It became not so much about, we got to do this thing, but about opening the conversation up so that everybody was in the conversation. I did have a lot of conversations, a lot of check-ins. My boss, even at times, was like, you're taking a whole lot of time talking with people one-on-one and asking them a whole lot of questions. Why aren't you just telling them what to do? And the bottom line was, it was an investment. It was an investment in time that in the long run absolutely paid off, because I got to get out of my own head and really have such a wonderful, talented group of people sharing their ideas too. Man, it was huge. All right, next slide. So yeah, this is what happens when you do those coaching conversations. It's really how things get done within the conversation. Everything goes faster, it's higher quality, you get more ideas at the table. And you don't have to have so much of your time doing the micromanaging piece about everything. Next slide. So not reading all of these, but these are some of the outcomes, some of the benefits you get to have when you are a leader who coaches. If you're at all into, and I'm pretty sure you are, an idea around a leader who serves their team, this is absolutely where coaching is grounded. You get to be less lonely at the top, or less lonely because you're not the only thoughts that are going to be heard in the room. You're not the only thoughts that are going to be played into whatever decision comes up to. The benefits of building not just your own coaching as a leader, but building coaching within the organization as the organization becomes that much stronger as well. Conversations and transactions are much more high quality. You're creating a culture of thinking and creativity and innovation and insights much further beyond what you would come up with on your own. You're building a team. So when I was at Outreach, it went from meetings where I would say, they would tell me what their issue was, and I would say, well, why don't you do such and such? And I'd offer them a solution, right? So often we have teams that they're waiting to hear the solution from us. So what should I do? And you feel like you got to answer that, right? Like I gotta come up with an answer to that. But what we went from was that feeling of I have to give them a suggestion to they're coming to me with suggestions, because in that space where I'm not just automatically offering a suggestion, they're finding their own brilliant answers that are so much further than what I would have come up with. So the organization gets to be that much stronger at any time. But in a crisis, oh my goodness, in time like now, oh my goodness, you get to have, I just would not have had the ideas that came from other people, would not have come into my own head from my own experience. All right, next slide. All right, so we have grounded ourselves in how we're strong, and now we're going to stop and be humble because we're going to stop and appreciate, own, you don't have all the answers. You don't have to have all the answers. And there are times when people expect, maybe you expect yourself to have all the answers. Maybe, like I said, they might be coming and asking you for your recommendations. It could be completely fabricated, right? That like, maybe it's an organizational culture that's saying, you know what, people who lead need to have the answers. That's why you're in a leadership position. I've certainly been in those kinds of leadership roles too. As a coach, you get to put that aside. You already know you're strong. You already know you're a strong leader. You've grounded yourself in that. So stopping for a minute and going, I'm betting there's somebody else in this room who's closer to the situation, who maybe is doing direct work with kids that I didn't today because I was in my office. They're going to have a stronger perspective on what's going on here. And so what you get to do as a leader is you get to make space for their answers too. You also get to honor that there are so many life experiences on your team that are so very valuable, and creating that space makes room for people to share those life experiences and have them feed into such a collective wisdom for your organization. Next slide. All right, so if you're not a leader who tells and you're not a leader who commands, what are you? These are some things that you do when you're a leader who coaches. So I said a minute ago, you're holding space. And I mean like physical space, I mean mental space, I mean just the whole concept of creating more space because you're allowing space for others to share their solutions. You're allowing space for others to show up as who they are, all of who they are, not just the person who does the job and checks these boxes on their job description, right? They're showing up with all of who they are because you've created that safety as well. When you're communicating as a leader who coaches, you're going to be honest, you're going to be clear. Here's the thing, as completely as possible. Right now, did somebody give you all the answers to everything that's going on right now? Because I haven't heard them, right? Like, we don't know. But what you get to do, and the way you earn people's trust, and the way you create that safe space, is you communicate as completely as you can today. You're not going to have all the answers. That's a humility piece, but you can share what you know. When I was at Outreach, the last couple of years I was there, I was executive director, and I became executive director just in enough time to close down the organization, to merge it into schools. That's what was needed with what was going on in schools. It was what was needed in the funding environment. So I spent a whole lot of time communicating as completely as possible a timeline for when we were going to have layoffs. I have a feeling that some of you might be in a situation like that right now. Maybe you've already been in that situation. The really, really important thing was being as open, honest, and giving as much information as I had, not holding back, so that we continued to have full conversations and trusting conversations along the way. There's a piece over on the side, the next one, holding perspective. You don't have to be rose-colored glasses. You don't have to be Pollyanna about everything. But the more, as a leader, you are keeping a positive and authentic approach, the more you're keeping things out of kind of complaint space and into that positive space, you're actually not just, sometimes we feel like, oh, well, I'm not being real if I'm being positive. But what you're actually doing is you're helping everyone on your team access the parts of their brain that are not fight or flight. So the negative or the I can't or whatever, that's really fight or flight mode. But if you are creating space that's positive, that's forward thinking, people are then using their own brain space to be resourceful, to be solution focused. And the ideas are going to come further because you've created that safe space for them to do that. Then from there flows inspiration. Then from there flows that buy-in, right? Because their ideas have landed within the conversation, within possible solutions. And then from there, they're motivated to act. You don't have to spend your time telling, because you've created a space where people feel like they're doing actually finding the answers that make most sense to them, not the answers that just makes most sense to you. All right, next slide. So we know within the YPQI framework, ask, listen, encourage as a youth work methods training, and as that approach to working with young people, I would say there's a bit of a mirror in what we're talking about here in the mindset. So if you're approaching young people, you're approaching your programming from the perspective of conversations where you're asking, listening, and encouraging. With young people, it's a very similar thing to come in with a mindset as a leader who coaches, to start with being grounded, with being humble, and then with being a deep listener. Next slide. So what I have here, I did a whole lot of research around not just coaching, but also coaching in times of crisis. And this is the framework that I created that I think could really be helpful as you think about how you're approaching your conversations, your own, I don't know, I guess the word is still mindset, but as you see on this framework, there's listen is twice on here because that's how important it is. When I was looking at all the research, and you're going to get a lot of the links to a lot of the research that I'm referring to, the things that were most important is that you're listening, you're asking questions, and you're empathizing. Now, when you stop and go, okay, if I'm listening to my staff's perspectives and I'm asking a lot of questions to help make sure I get the full perspective, and then I'm stopping to really listen to their answers, not listen to my own head and how I'm coming up with the next question for them, but really stopping and listening to their answers, then we're moving into that empathy, making sure we're creating space for them, not just to hear the information, but to hear the human being and to make sure they acknowledge that they're being heard, right? Those are the things that are really important to happen before you get to the actions, which is the focus on the future. Focus on the future is the part where you get to say, okay, what are our goals? What are we going to do about it? What are the steps? What is the timeline? How are we going to hold each other accountable? That's all focus on the future. And those are things that we often jump to. As a coach, there's a whole lot that happens before that. If you think of it like a 60-minute check-in, you could look at this as like roughly 10 minutes on each of the sections, and then focus on the future gets 20 minutes. If you're thinking of it as a walk and talk with somebody who's on your team, you might want to stop and go, okay, before I have this 5-minute talk from A to B with them, maybe I can stop and think, have I spent the time I need to listening to their perspective before we jump right to the actions that need to be taken? And if you realize, oh, wait, no, I really have not had time because we're virtual, because, whatever the reason is, I have not had time to really listen to them and understand where they're coming from. You might want to take those 5 minutes to do that, and then find a time to have a longer conversation around the actions later, because the actions will be so much more valuable, so much more high impact, so much more creative and followed through if first your team member really, really believes they were listened to and you know where they're coming from first. So, and I know you all have heard about listening before, so I don't want to go too much into it, except just to preach how important it is. Before you talk, you listen, and before you offer advice, you listen, and you see if anybody else has a solution that was even better than what you would have said, because they're in their shoes and they're doing their work. So that level 1, 2, 3 listening that was on the screen a second ago, Sheryl-Amber, if you could put it back, that's the idea behind, level, just deeper and deeper listening. And how do you go from listening to find out how it impacts me, to how really I'm spending all my time listening to you and focusing on you, to an even more deeper level at level 3, which is like, yeah, I'm hearing everything you're saying. I'm also stopping to intuit the rest of the pieces of the puzzle, or I'm stopping to remember the last conversation I had with you when you said this other thing. I wonder if that might play into a piece of what's going on right now too. So that's why it's called global listening, because you're taking in that bigger context. So we can talk more about that at another time. I wanted to give you that resource though, the depth of listening. There's a link in there too you can go to get more information. All right, now the rainbow, Sheryl-Amber. So when you're doing your listening, you get to find out what you need to know. You get to find out how things get done. The great thing about the deeper and deeper listening you do is you also find out why they show up like they do. And underneath all of that, who they truly are, not just at work, not just in this moment, not just as they're interacting with young people, but who they truly are, because they're bringing all of that into the work they're doing and all of that brilliance into the work that they're doing too. And you get to pull on all of that as you're showing how you value them. All right, so some more tips for listening. You've got them all here. Couple things I'm just going to say on this is it's even more important when it's virtual or on the phone that you stop and do listening and pull in the rest of the environment. You can learn a lot by what's going on behind somebody in their background, right? You can learn a lot by how distracted they are because they've got so many other things in their environment, and that can tell you something about how you support them. So that's a huge piece. Has anybody ever heard of WAIT? W-A-I-T? Put a thumbs up if you've heard of WAIT. Awesome. This is one of the most beautiful things I've ever used in coaching. WAIT stands for Why Am I Talking? Pretty simple, but pretty true. If you stop and you go, why am I talking right now? Maybe they should be talking. Maybe if I do a little more listening and give them a chance to talk, the most interesting things happen when I'm in a coaching conversation, when I just let the other person talk. And then I allow the silence, like they'll say what I need to say, stop. And I might say, okay, so we're talking about such and such. And that's all I say. And I leave more silence. I don't even have to ask a question because the next thought comes to them. And then the thought after that thought is the solution. And it's amazing. So why am I talking is huge to create the space. You know what happens? My kids do this all the time. Mom, I'm bored. I have nothing to do. You know what happens right after boredom? Creativity. You know what comes out of space and silence? Brilliance. Creativity, brilliance, innovation comes from that space in the silence. So the more you say, why am I talking? The more you realize, I'm not the only one who has to have these brilliant ideas. We all get to have them. I don't need to have that pressure to come up with the ideas either. All right. Some more things about, so after you're doing your listening, the next thing on here, just so that you know, is asking questions, right? Y'all know about open-ended questions, asking open-ended questions. There's some other tips on here, including the silence we just talked about. Something that I do, that last item on there, keep some questions in your back pocket. So there are ways that you can start a question that's just going to end up an open-ended question. And the ones that are particularly comfortable to you, put them in your back pocket. So next slide, Sheryl-Amber. I made this list of open-ended and closed questions that could help you with young people, could help you with your team. But there are a few on here that I will use if I'm in that silence and I feel like I need to ask a question and the question is just not coming to me. I'll just say, so what else? And sometimes that's all I need to say. And then we get back on track, we get back moving forward. Or I'm really curious about such and such. Could you tell me more? Those are a couple of my back pocket questions. If you've ever been in coaching with me, you might have heard those because I say them. Just gave you a couple of my little tricks. But yeah, so you've got some questions there that you can use, you can practice. All of this is about practice. So try them out, see how they feel for you. All right, let's see. After you've, in that framework, you've listened, you've asked questions, you've listened some more, and you've listened even more and talked even less. And every time you do this, you get to practice more and more and more about that. The next step is empathy. And I'm not going to give you resources on empathy here. I'm going to give you some resources in a minute that go toward empathy. You'll see some links on there in a way that we might be able to continue the conversation. But just to say that empathy, what's happening, I think right now too, is just connection, right? People needing to be connected, feel connected. I know I feel much more connected to y'all when I'm in person with you than when I do on a Zoom. Struggle because you're on a Zoom and like to see all your faces all at once, right in the same room. But empathy is so important right now for that reason. Empathy is so important right now because people are really struggling with so many things, from worry to shame to grieving to, there's so much going on. And the more they know that they're being heard, you don't have to solve all the problems because you can't solve all the problems. You can't have all the answers, but you can absolutely hold space for each person to know that you're hearing, that you're listening, and you're valuing them as people. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point and ask y'all a few questions that are kind of reflection questions, but they are reflection questions. And knowing that you're also going to get some additional resources in a few minutes. So that at this point, what's one thing you're taking with you from what I have presented to you or what you've kind of worked through in the past hour? And what will you do with it? Write it down on your paper, put it in the chat, however you want to share it. When you're done, could you give me a thumbs up? If you don't know how to do that, it's down in your reactions, down in the bottom menu. Awesome, Megan. Great, y'all. Thank you for sharing what you're taking with you. I always think I'm a good listener, and then I find out I could be a better listener over and over again. Great. Because I know there might be some people who need to go. I want to move on to the next slide. which is the next part of now what? I have created, has anybody used Padlet before? It's kind of like your own little, I don't know, it's kind of like a Facebook group around particular questions. I think, yeah, Sheryl-Amber just opened it up so we can take a look. I created a Padlet where we can keep the conversation going if you want. And I've set it up to ask a few questions along the way so that if you started and tried out some of these things, say there was an idea that you wanted, it sounds like listening is a lot of what people are taking, or just stopping to ground yourself first to remember how strong you are as a leader. So it's okay to not have all the ideas. This could be a place where we can go and keep the conversation going. I'll throw up some questions. I already have a few. How has the use of coaching skills improved your leadership is already there. Then we've got questions we might be able to help each other out. Like, what challenges are you having with listening deeply? What tips can you give to help others grow as a strong listener? So if you go back, you practice some of this stuff, you find out this is not working, I don't have time, there's a sense of urgency around getting to the next thing, you could throw that in here if you want. And we can keep our conversation going and have a virtual community around this. Okay. All right. A couple of other things that I want to give you all on that same slide. You want to keep learning. So I've got 2 flipboards that I've just started. Instead of you having to, dig through information, I try to be really pretty sparing in curating a few particular resources for you. One is around, oh, can you do that one? Yeah. One is around leader as coach, and the other one is leading in crisis. If you can't see them, I know I see Sheryl-Amber's having some trouble on there. I can send those resources another way too. There's not many. I've got I think 9 articles in one and 3 or 4 articles in the other one right now. I'll add some more, but I don't want to inundate. I don't have time to read all that stuff. It's my work, so I do have time, and that's what I do, but it's not your primary thing. So I want to give you the ones that are the most valuable for you. So I want to make sure you get some links there too. Okay. In addition, next slide. So in addition to the slides that are in the Flipboard, some other things that could help. Erickson Coaching International is the organization that I've been doing my formal coach training through. I've been coaching for years. I recently decided I need to go ahead and get International Coach Federation certified. Just finished out that process. So when you go to Erickson's website, there's a free coaching resources section that's got some great stuff. And that Sheryl-Amber just pulled that up too. Some awesome, awesome stuff about some things are like, yeah, I don't need to do that. It's not as curated. Well, I'm not the one doing the curating. So like mindfulness, pieces that you can do beyond the up and down the mountain. That's where I got that exercise from. But there's some other pieces that are on there might help you with your grounding as well as a leader. And then, of course, I think everybody on here is also in YPQI work. If not, I wanted to be sure you had the link in case there's anybody who's coming from any other worlds too. All right, next slide. We are a couple minutes, we're at 2:04 right now. So I would say this, how about we do this? We go through the remainder of the slides, and I can stick around if anybody has any additional questions that you want to ask, and we can do that at the end. Is that okay? I see some nods. Cool. Okay. All right. Oh, I see a question there. I want to encourage a training on the difference between leading as a coach versus leading in crisis. So I think that some of those resources will give you a little more information on leading as a coach versus leading in crisis. I also would say that leading as a coach and leading in crisis both start at the same place, which is what we have time for in this hour. Which is listening. So grounding yourself in your own practice, being humble, opening yourself up to not having all the solutions, and being that deep listener are the same regardless. And so I want to make sure that I go back and acknowledge that piece too. I wanted to build what we saw here as something that was helpful to you regardless of now or in the future. Yes, there's much, much, much more to be said and learned on leading as a coach, but I wanted to be sure that you had that foundation and that start regardless. So some ways to get in touch with me, a lot of them are on there, just so you know. There's a lot of different ways you can get either resources from me or just get in touch with me if you have further questions. I have always been around this community, and I will continue to be around this community, but I want to make sure you have these links because it's just harder for us to see each other in person. We're not going to be passing each other in coffee shops and at COPs, that sort of thing. So please reach out. Let's see. Absolutely. So there was a comment, far too often non-Black people and non-Black people from New Orleans teach Black children in crisis mode from a preconceived notion that something is wrong with them, and that is based in racism. Absolutely. So very true. And I think that the Youth Alliance trainings in Soul Rebels, and very much going from trauma-informed, centering on trauma-informed and the idea of trauma versus the idea of healing, and being healing-centered in your approach is so important. And Sheryl-Amber and Rashida and I have had conversations about making sure that what we're talking about is about listening, and grounding what we're doing in listening, and honoring that other people's perspectives are so very important, and honoring all of who they are. And the fact that when you listen and you ask, you're making room for solutions instead of making room for seeing that the other person has all of these deficits. It's much more about creating room for everyone to come in with their strengths, with their perspectives, and with solutions and creativity far beyond whatever my white experience is going to come up with. Sure. Far more valuable too than what my experience would be. Next slide, I think. Sheryl-Amber.
We have a question as well from Samuel. He asks, what books do you recommend for having hard conversations and are listening well?
Okay. Books for having hard conversations or listening well. So I would say that there are some links that are much shorter than books. I wanted to give you all some links as opposed to books so that it was a quicker read for you. There are, I want to see particularly books. My original training and having hard conversations was around the book created out of Harvard called Difficult Conversations, which was used a lot in schools right after Hurricane Katrina, but it goes beyond application in schools. Difficult Conversations is very much about honoring the other person as well as honoring yourself and your own perspective, and acknowledging, look, I'm coming in with, I need to stop and be self-aware of my own biases, of my own emotional state right now. We have to create a space together where we can hear each other. So that's part of that hard conversations. I think though, Samuel, that what you're talking about, thank you, Victoria, Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott is what she's mentioning. I would say that a lot of the work I do around hard conversations and listening well happens within that coaching context. So that if I start by doing that listening, I start by asking questions out of curiosity. I really, and I'm not asking, and when I say curiosity, I don't mean questions like, why'd you do that? I mean, which is a why, and it's an open-ended question, but it is not at all creating any sort of space for further information or further perspective. But if you're asking, I'm curious that about your approach. Can you tell me more? I really want to know what went on, or what those pieces were, or even there are times I think when we know there are certain things that have to be rules, or we know that we're under this particular set of requirements right now. If we're meeting in person, there's got to be social distancing. So there's a matter of fact, we have to keep kids 6 feet apart. We know that piece. How can we maybe find solutions together to make that happen? When you're talking with this team member who just doesn't think it's necessary, or who really, really is struggling making it happen for whatever reason, instead of going, you got to keep kids 6 feet apart, it could be something that's really like, we all know this. We all know that's part of what we've got to be doing right now. And it is tough. We've been looking at this summer in summer camps. So what kind of solutions can we come up with together? Can really help open that up so that it feels like everybody's coming up with a solution, and it's not just you and a top-down kind of approach. Samuel, I think that might be part of the answer to your question. I think some of those resources might help as well to get there. Your experience with the people serving them often impacts them. Yes, so are we good. I want to check to be sure that it's okay that I move into like looking at the chat and answering any questions y'all might have too. I'm going back to my waffle to see. For sure, youth. Kim Possible, Sheryl-Amber was responding to, I think, the comment about non-Black people teaching Black children. How youth are perceived by the people serving them often impacts them in ways that exacerbate the experience of racism. Yeah, absolutely. That whole mentality or the thought around, yeah, I'm on this mission. I want to fix things, and yeah, that kind of thing, I think, is what Sheryl-Amber's getting at. And I feel like, I know for myself, having shifted my work into nonprofits again after Hurricane Katrina, the most important thing I could do is to go, I don't need my perspective to be the perspective that is speaking right now. I need to be listening. And so this huge piece and this huge emphasis on listening is so important as that perspective to take there. What is it about me you can't teach, and there's nothing wrong with Black students? Are those two books? Is it Toure? I don't know how to say your name. I don't know if you can come off mute to tell us if that's a book or not.
Yes, those are two books, and it's Toure.
Oh, Toure. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Toure. And thank you for your comments along the way too. Really
you're
helpful.
welcome. Yeah, those are two books. The latter book is by Dr. Kunjufu, and the other book is by two people, and I can't remember the names. I think one of them is Angela something, and the other one is by somebody Rodriguez. I forgot. I thought I had it with me, but it's in the car. I don't remember because I carry those two books with me all the time.
Oh, wow. Good to know.
I carry a lot of books with me, but those are definitely two that I carry with me because I never know where I'm going to be. I don't have to pull them out.
Excellent. So. And you know what? Those two books, it sounds like, just from their titles, also are a great intersection of youth development, asset-based approach, making sure you're working from young people's strengths. Yeah. And what we're talking about right now, starting from a place of listening and being sure that we're starting from, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the perspectives. I need to hear from you. Great.
Yeah, that's why this was so great. This was really good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad. And this is just the start of the conversation. I was like, how am I going to put all this in an hour, y'all? So please, if you feel inclined to continue the conversation on the Padlet, or if you feel inclined to email, please do. I'm really passionate about helping you make sure you have the resources you need. And I'm really passionate about coaching as the approach, because I just know how much it has served me in serving in my role, no matter what my role has been. I would also say there was a moment right when the YPQI work started in New Orleans where I was shifting my title, my position, and my organization I was working with, and I forgot the importance of coaching. And I was doing more telling and more command and control. And YPQI started, I went to my first Qualitie coaching training and went, how did I forget all of this? I went right from that training to one of the people I was supervising, sat down and talked about a hard conversation. I just apologized. I mean, I really was like, I am sorry. I know we have been stuck in our work because I have thought that what I was supposed to do is tell you what to do. And from this moment on, that's not how we're doing this anymore. And he looked at me like, what? But then after a few more conversations, man, that was when beautiful things started happening.
But I think that's the humility part that you mentioned too, about humble, even being able to apologize, right? A lot of times the so-called leaders or coaches don't even know how to do that. So for you to immediately recognize that and then understand that I have to apologize to them, right? That just shows the leader in you. And I think that for me anyway, all of that was encompassed in your presentation. I came on late, but I was taking notes and I started taking pictures. It was going fast. I was like, let me take pictures of everything so I can write everything back down. And but it was just, everything was there for me to take with. And some stuff, you know, like even if I heard it before, it was still just a refresher that, you know, okay, I can take this with. And I think that, you know, Sheryl-Amber and Rashida, this is just what they already embody, you know. And so I always use this thing, there's no such thing as preaching to the choir. Even the choir has to go to rehearsal, right? And so you can't hear this enough, you know. And so when we put this into practice, our children then began to live this, and they put this into practice. And so when we say that we have to play this game, no, we don't. That's how we remove the plan of the game, and this becomes the actual work in the business. And so our children begin to do better as a result of us doing better for them. And so I absolutely appreciate your presentation. I appreciate them for having you be a part of this. This was hands down amazing. I did a whole retreat last week that was good. This was spot on. And so hands down to you, definitely hands down to Rashida and Sheryl-Amber for this. This was really, really good. This was necessary.
Thank you for all of that. Thank you for your contribution too. I really, really appreciate hearing. I want to make sure I'm showing up to serve you where you need to go next and where you want to go next. So yeah, please know that the invitation to continue the conversation is there. Really appreciate your affirming words as well. I hear them. Any other? Thank y'all so much. It's not about me though. I want to make sure y'all have the resources. So are there any other questions or any other comments that you want to make sure get in there? Even if the question is about like, okay, what do I do next? Then that can be something. Send me away with some homework to do to add into that Padlet for y'all too. I'm just looking at the chat for a minute, see if there's anything else anybody wants to add. Any requests for next? All right. So good. Megan's going in right now and applying this in a conversation that's coming up right now. So yes, you're going to get the slides. Megan's asking if you could go back to that open-ended slides, open-ended question slide to get a quick snap of it, because Megan wants to use that immediately. Awesome. You want to take a picture of that too.
Emily has a question too. I saw it in the chat.
Emily, where to go? Oh, how do you balance listening and empathizing without becoming a therapist? Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I would say that, well, one thing you can do is, so in my coaching, if somebody is getting to a place, well, I'm going to back up. Let me see if I can answer this a little more clearly. The first thing I would say is practice. So there are going to be times, and I'll acknowledge that you're going to make mistakes sometimes, right? I would say that it's more important to lean into having the other person know they're heard. And yes, there might be times in that where it goes a little further into the realm of, a little further into needing to listen more, as opposed to getting to that focus on the future. Okay, so that could actually happen. Maybe today, and especially right now, maybe today is just not, we're not going to have that conversation around action. What you can do before you hang up on the Zoom or whatever, you know, however you end your conversation, you can say, you know what, I know we needed to spend more time here. I know I was hoping that we do such and such. However, I completely acknowledge that this is the gift of this moment, as we had the conversation we had. Next time we talk, can we please make sure we're covering such and such, or I have questions around such and such. Can we please maybe address some of those, and do it in a way that is very much like, it's direct. You got to get some things done, right? But knowing that if the person's headspace is not going to receive activity or action as the next thing, it's just not going to get you anywhere anyway, right? If it's to the point where you feel like they need support, like therapist or mental health support beyond what you can offer, that's also a different conversation to have, right? So that's when you go into, I hear all along, making sure they're being heard, making sure you don't have to give full sentences or heard you say this and this and this and this, but you can say really kind of quick things like, if they say, you know what, home is this, home is that, home is that, you just say, okay, home, I hear you. And that's all you need to say to just acknowledge that. So they know they've been heard. They also know that there's further conversation to be had, that maybe the next time we can talk about the action. If you feel like it's your job to just kind of shift it, you feel like they're in a place where, I think we can shift this into the focus on the future, then you can start, like, that's one of those open-ended questions on there. So how might we, and if you kind of go from there and go, I hear these things about what you're saying. I'm sorry you're going through these things. How might I support you next? You can shift it into action next to, right? Or how might we such and such and such from there? Or now that these things have been acknowledged, what might be a solution that can come from this? Or now that I'm hearing your your perspective on what's going on, what might be some solutions that can help? What have you already tried? Are all languages around action that are still about listening, that are still about honoring their perspective, that are not about you saying, okay, well, now you got to do this. I heard you, but we have to do this. Like, that but word is that's a problematic piece, right? But if you're acknowledging what they're saying, and then you're also helping to move into what action might happen from there. How might this connect to the way you showed up yesterday at programming? How might what you're telling me now be an important piece of information for me to have when we go into next week? Does that answer your question, Emily, or give you some thoughts around that? Okay. So email with the slides. You're going to get an email with the slides and a link to the Padlet. Yes. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up with some of these questions. Thank y'all for blowing up the chat like I asked. Great, 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 great.
There's another question from Emily at the bottom.
Okay. Second, there are lots of resources for white people teaching Black children, but I'm wondering if anyone has any resources for white people supervising Black adults. Really good question. Emily, Rashida says she's working on it. I don't know any off the top of my head. And we talked a little bit about this earlier in the summer, Emily. Sheryl-Amber and I don't know if Rashida was in that conversation or not. One of the things we wanted to make sure we focused on here is absolutely just that listening, like starting from that place of humility, starting from that place of listening, and opening up that space so that I know from my experience, and I will not say that I've been perfect or right every time. I can like there are times when I go, oh, I can't believe I did that, right? I have a whole lot to learn. I know that the moment I feel I did my best, I showed up the best I could, was absolutely when I started from listening. And when I then took what I heard and acknowledged to the other person that I heard them.
Yeah, so, thank you for responding to that, Angela. And as Rashida said in the chat, we are working on that. And I think some of those answers are in a few of our Soul Rebels trainings, which we'll be pushing out. And we've also been doing some site-based training. So if anyone does want a Soul Rebels training that talks about equity and trauma-informed approaches, not just with children, but also with staff, I think the Soul Rebels fully aligns with that. You can always email me or the info account and request a training. We've been doing site-based trainings virtually. They've been going really well. We have one next week. And we're also working on a trauma-informed practice toolkit for professionals in your field, educators. It's going to be useful for just about anyone who works with people, who interacts with people, which is all of us. So yeah, we have some really exciting work coming up that's really going to be able to get at a lot of these systems-based issues, how we're treating folks, and where some of these things are rooted and where we can go.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we're wrapping up. Thank you all so much for being here, for contributing, for wanting the information about growing yourself as a leader and showing up for your team from a coaching perspective. I am here in whatever way, email, all those things that we said, plus the Padlet, you'll get that link too, so we can keep the conversation going if you want. All right. Take care. Be healthy. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.